G'day everybody, welcome to another Affinity photo tutorial. This week I'm going to do a fantasy composite. And I'm going to start off with the photo that you see here on the screen. And to save a little bit of time, I've already copied and pasted all of my assets into their own layer here and named each of the layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the path layer here and make sure I've clicked on the path. I'll come down here to the mask layer and click mask and click on the mask here. I'm going to come over here to my gradient tool and I just want to drag a little gradient, but I'm going to turn it around because I want black on top and then drag the white down. So what I'm trying to do is just blend these two pictures together. So I'm going to bring that black down a little bit as well, and we'll bring the white up just so we've got sort of those layers blending together. Once I'm happy with where I've got those layers, I'm going to click on my brush here. I'm going to make sure I've got a very soft brush, painting in black, my flow at 25%. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger and I'm using my right and left bracket keys and I'm just going to blend that in a little bit. So I've got those two pictures blending together. I'm going to change over to white now, hitting X on my keyboard and just blend that path in and get a little bit more of that grass back in here on the sides. And just blend it so it looks like it's sort of one picture. Blending that in. Okay, I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is click on the path layer and add a new pixel layer down here. Just on here, I'm going to call this mist. Change the blend mode to soft light. I've still got my brush, the nice soft brush. I'm still painting in white, but I might just drop that to about 20 at the moment. Make my brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to just add a little bit of mist onto this picture. Okay, I'm happy with that. So then right on top of the mist here, I'm going to come down to my adjustment layers and add an exposure. And I'm going to bring the exposure of everything underneath that exposure layer. So just make that a little bit darker. Might come back to the mask here again on the path and we'll just come back to our brush on the mask, painting in black. I'll just blend that in a little bit better there. Okay, I'm going to click on exposure and the cave layer all the way down to the bottom here. I'm going to group that and then that's going to become my background. So we've got our background all set with both of those layers just blended together. The next picture that I'm going to bring over is a picture of the trees here. So let's just turn on the trees, grab our move tool, make sure we're on those trees, and let's just drag that up and resize. And what I'm going to do here is just copy this tree here and this tree here. So I'm going to do them one at a time. So I'm going to grab my selection brush tool here and let's zoom in a little bit. And I'm just going to select this tree here first. And I'm going to select a little bit of the ground as well. Make my brush a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to copy that with a Command C and a Command V. We'll turn off the bottom trees at the moment, just so I've got this tree here. Let's make our picture a bit smaller with our Command minus. And let's just call this one tree number 1. Okay, let's go Command D onto our move tool and let's move our tree up here and then bring it down. Maybe make it a little bit wider. Let's turn our tree layer back on again. So I'm going to come back to my selection brush tool and I'm just going to grab this tree on the side here as well. We'll get both of our trees in place. Select this tree here all the way down to the ground as well. Remember, we can use our Option key to take that selection away. And I'll do the same, Command C and Command V. We'll turn off that bottom layer of trees there and then let's just call this tree 2 now. Hit Enter, we'll get rid of the marching ants with our Command D or Escape. Back to our move tool and we'll move this tree onto this side and drag it down and maybe just bring it out a little bit to about where that stone is. Let's come back to our first tree and add a mask. Click on the mask, back to our brush. Still got a soft brush. Let's change the flow to about 25%. We're painting in black on the mask. And now let's just blend that tree into the ground here. Remember, we can always change over to white if we just want to get some of that tree back again. Okay, that's not too bad. While we're here, let's click on the tree and add an exposure and clip that to the tree, and we'll just bring that down a little bit. That looks good there. Let's do the same to the other tree. Let's add our mask. Clicking on our mask here, we've still got our brush. Still at 25%, but we need to change back over to black. So let's hit X on our keyboard. And again, we'll do the same for this tree and just blend it in. Back over to white, make my brush a little bit smaller, and let's just blend that tree in a little bit better. And that's not too bad. Let's again add an exposure. So clicking on the adjustments, exposure, clip that exposure to the tree, and let's darken that tree down a little bit. So the next picture that I'm going to use is the picture of these doors here. So let's grab our move tool, bring these doors up. We want our doors to be behind our trees, so we're just going to drag that down behind the trees. I'm going to stretch this out all the way across because I want the illusion that these doors are really, really big doors. Maybe about there looks okay. Let's just drag that up a little bit as well. So our doors are in place. Like I said, I want these doors to have the illusion that they're very, very big. Okay, I'm going to grab my rust layer here now, turn my rust on, bring that up. I'm going to clip it to the doors. So I'm going to drag it down, clip it to the doors. Drag it so it covers all of the doors. Going to change the blend mode to overlay on the rust layer here and drop the opacity to 50%. I'm also going to add an exposure down here on adjustments, clip that to the door layer and darken them up a bit. And then on the door layer, I'm going to add a mask. Clicking on the mask layer, back to my brush, still at 25%. Hit X to get back to black, a little bit bigger, and I'm going to just blend those doors and make sure that it looks like those plants are just in front of the doors here. Okay, I'm happy with that one. Come over to this one and blend that in as well. And get that grass in front of that door. Changing over to black, make my brush a little bit smaller. We want to make sure we don't erase any of the door. Brush a little bit bigger, back to black. Blend that in. Command 0, and I'm happy with the way that that looks at the moment. So the next thing that we are going to bring in is our wizard. Grab my move tool, make sure I'm clicked on my wizard and make him a bit smaller. I'm going to place him right at the front here, about there. A little bit smaller, as I said, I want these doors to seem sort of oversized. I'm going to add an exposure layer to my wizard as well and clip it. Bring the exposure down a little bit. Underneath my wizard, so I'm going to click on the tree 1 layer here and add a new pixel layer. And I'm going to call that wizard shadow. And I've got my black brush, got the color black selected, so I'm going to come back to my brush. About 25% is okay at the moment. And I'm just going to paint in that black. Make my brush a little bit bigger just for the wizard shadow here. Okay, might bring that down a tiny little bit. Just darken that area up there. Okay, that looks okay. We got the wizard's shadow there. Next picture that I'm going to open up, I've got this picture of these stars here. So I'm going to grab my move tool and just bring this into place here. I'm going to change the blend mode to screen. On this one, obviously I don't want the picture of the ocean and the land here, so I'm going to grab my erase tool. And I'm going to erase the picture there of the sea. So I just want the stars here, so I'm just going to move those harsh lines as well. Gives me this picture of these stars. Grabbing my move tool, I'm going to move them into place over the book here. I can still grab my erase tool and just erase a little bit more. That's okay. And I'm going to make a copy, Command J. And I'm going to move some sort of about like that as well. So sort of like magic coming out of the book here. On my wizard, I'm going to add another exposure, flip it to the wizard, and this time I'm going to make it really bright. And then I'm going to invert that exposure layer with the Command I. Grab my brush, make sure I'm painting in white. I've hit X on the keyboard to paint in white. Make my brush a little bit bigger. Let's zoom in to our wizard here. And then let's make that book glow a little bit more in his hand. Some on his face here as well. While I've got this exposure, going to make my brush smaller and bring my flow up to about 60%. And I'm going to just go round my wizard and highlights in there. I'm going to really highlight his hand and you'll see why later. I'm just going to add some highlights around his cloak here because all of my light's coming from behind. Just highlight his face a little bit and a little bit on the hood here. Okay, Command 0, so I've got that in place. Also on my wizard, another adjustment, I'm going to add a recolor. Clip that to my wizard, bring him down to that sort of really glowy blue about there. Again, I'm going to invert it. Still got my brush, taking my flow back down to about 25%. Brush a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to add some of that blue glow. Okay, Command 0. So that's not looking too bad at the moment. You can always just drop the opacity on that a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to add is my stones. Now let's click on the stones here. And this is a circle of stones. I'm going to that right up the top here, but I want it to be behind the doors. So let's drag that down behind the doors. Going to rotate it a little bit, maybe make it a bit smaller. So these are floating stones in the back of the cave. What I'm going to do right underneath is add a pixel layer underneath the stone. So I'm going to drag it underneath the stones and I'm going to pick a bluey color, but a really sort of bright blue right in the middle here. Grabbing my brush, making sure that blue color is activated. I'm going to zoom in on my stones and you can see that I've added these symbols. So I'm going to turn my flow right up, maybe to 100. Make my brush a bit smaller and just where I've got these symbols, I'm going to paint on these symbols. These stones that I've created here will be available for you on the Buy Me a Coffee site absolutely free if you want to use them in any of your projects. But on that pixel layer with my symbols or the blue color, I'm going to add an effects, a layer effects. And I'm going to choose outer glow, come to my color, grab my color picker and pick that blue and activate it. And then I'm going to turn the radius up. and the intensity. A bit less, maybe the radius, about there, looks pretty good. And then Command 0, because I want those stones and those symbols look like they're glowing. Also on the stones, I'll add an exposure, clip it, make it really bright. And again, I'm going to invert it. Still on my brush, flow back down to about 25%. Change the colors back to default, or hit D on the keyboard and X to get white. Make my brush a bit bigger, and then I'll make just sort of inside those stones, just the tips of them are glowing a little bit there. Okay, next picture I'll turn on is my swirl here. So let's turn on the swirl, change the blend mode to screen, come over to our move tool and make that quite small. We're going to put that behind the stone. So let's just collapse that and bring that behind the stones here. Make it a bit bigger. Right in the middle there. Let's grab our erase tool and just erase those lines that you can see. That blends in nicely. And that is looking pretty good so far. The next picture that I can turn on now is the picture of my lightning here. Grab my move tool. Let's bring it up. And again, I'm going to change the blend mode to screen. Make it smaller. Just turn that. Want it so it's sort of like coming out of the wizard's hand here, going into the stone circle. So let's put that there. Let's make another copy. Command J. Let's turn that one around there. Let's make another copy. This one will make a little bit smaller. Okay, we'll make another copy. Command J. Turn that round this way. Another copy. Got lots of this sort of lightning coming out of his hands here. So that looks okay. Let's put all that lightning into a group. And so we've got our lightning in place. Might just grab my stones here, just turn them around about there. Okay. So we've got our wizard and everything in place here. Let's make our picture a little bit smaller and turn on our embers here. So there's a picture of these embers. And just going to put it in the corner here and just about there, change the blend mode to screen. Going to put a recolor on the embers. So let's come down here to our adjustment and recolor. Clip that to the embers. Again, bring them up into that sort of bluey color. About there, looks pretty good. Let's copy them, Command J. And go arrange, flip horizontal, and let's move some over to this side. Let's highlight both of these ember layers and come to layer and merge selected. We'll make another copy, Command J. I'm going to bring one of the copies all the way down underneath or at the back of the stones. Front ones I'm going to change to 50%, the opacity to 50%. Sort of gives us a little bit of depth with that sort of magic swirling around in the air with our wizard in place. Let's come back to our doors now and let's add another exposure layer. You guessed it, we're going to turn it up really bright and invert it. And then on our brush, about 25%, painting in white, we'll make our brush a little bit bigger. I think I'm going to bring the flow up to about 60% again. And there'll be some light coming through, just through these edges here. Some down here. I think this door would catch more of the light, so I'm going to bring that all the way down, probably to about 5%. Make my brush a bit bigger, a bit more light on that door. Also going to add a recolor as well. Clip that to my doors and again bring them into that sort of bluey color. Bluer. Again, invert that. Bring my flow up to about 15%. Still painting in white. I'm just sort of going to put a bit of blue on that door there. Flow a little bit less, just fading that off. And a little bit of blue inside where this light is streaming through as well. Going to do with the tree, I think I'll bring that tree's exposure down a little bit. And also the other tree, I think I'll bring the exposure down a little bit on that. Then I might just add a recolor for that as well on each of these trees here. Inverting that, just ever so slight bit of blue on there. And the other tree as well, to recolor. Okay, right on top, I'm going to add a curves. Dip that a little bit and make that S curve. Might come down and drop my embers on this side as well, down a little bit. Maybe to 50 as well. Okay, on top of my curves, I'm going to add a selective color. Right on top, make sure this drop down box says neutrals, and I'm going to do my normal 30% on the cyan, minus 15 on the yellows. Back to my curves, and I think I'm just going to make it a little bit brighter. About there, looks pretty good. So I might come up here to layer and merge visible. Come over here to my develop persona. I'm going to up the clarity, bring the contrast down a little bit, and bring the vibrance up, and maybe just bring the saturation down a little bit, and maybe the exposure down. Maybe that saturation up a bit more. There we go. Let's hit develop. Command 0. So there you go, everybody. That is my fantasy composite this week. I hope you have enjoyed the tutorial. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit that notification bell so you know when I upload a new video. If you'd like to support my channel, you can head over to the Buy Me a Coffee site or use the super thanks symbol below. I'll have those stones on the Buy Me a Coffee site that you can download absolutely free to use in any of your pictures that you like. All the other photos will be linked below, but until next time, I'm going to say to you, stay well, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.